I carefully drove through the late evening traffic heading across London towards the Marriott Hotel. My mind filled with thoughts of revenge and all kinds of mischief that I had been contemplating as a suitable response to my situation. Whatever happened in the next few hours, at least 3 people's lives would never be the same. It was still uncertain how many would have any kind of life at all after this night. My name is Sal, short for Salvatore. I am of Italian descent. My parents have been in the UK since the late 1960s. The family business is the famous Italian restaurant, which has been the mainstay of my family and our extended relatives. We are a close-knit bunch when it comes down to it, but unlike in times past, we do not live in each other's lives on a daily basis. Family events are always well attended, and no one wants to be the one who isn't where they should be and suffer disapproval from my grandma, the matriarch, who must always be obeyed, no matter what. I married Connie 7 years ago. We were both approaching 30 at the time. We seemed to be drawn together after being in relationships that were not heading anywhere and, in some ways, though satisfying, did not have what it takes for a long-term commitment. We met, had fun for almost 2 years, and then decided to tie the knot. My grandma never warmed up to Connie. She seemed to just about tolerate her. She was never rude or anything, but there was always an air of mistrust as she looked at Connie, as if she was waiting for her to do something wrong. How do women sense these things? It is beyond me. At times, she could barely conceal her lack of fondness for my wife, but never voiced her opinion in front of others. She said to me just before we married, "Keep an eye on that one Sal. She seems shady. Be careful and always guard your heart." That was all she said, but for some reason, her words replayed in my mind as I navigated the busy streets of London. There was no need to rush. I knew exactly where I was going, and if there were any changes to my evening, I would be notified by text or call on my phone. I eased into the traffic on the Marylebone Road, which, as usual, was still quite heavy even though it was after 9 p.m. The bright lights of the city lit up the darkened streets as I turned towards the city center, and I could feel my heart rate and breathing start to quicken. Not long now, I thought to myself. Then this farce will be over and done with. A month ago, I discovered that my wife had been meeting a guy in secret. This had been going on for at least 6 months, as I discovered through some digging. How did I find out? It was actually quite simple. She made a small mistake one night that made me suspect that something was wrong. That day when I found the pen, a cheap one from a hotel welcome pack, I couldn't figure out where it came from. I knew I hadn't stayed at that particular hotel before since I always use a well-known chain when I have to travel, which is usually once a month. I saved up the loyalty points, not that it amounted to much. Anyway, one evening I asked Connie if she had a pen, and she pulled out that pen from her huge handbag. Connie put the pen back in her bag without a word, and I said nothing, but I decided to look into it and see if there was anything I needed to worry about. It may have been small and insignificant, but that pen turned out to be the tiny crack in our marriage that led to major consequences. I can't explain why, but at the time, I just put it out of my mind and didn't dwell on it. We were meeting friends for a meal and drinks, and I didn't want to ruin the evening. It has become a regular thing for us to meet up with 2 other couples occasionally for a meal, followed by drinks and some dancing. We sat in the lounge of our favorite restaurant, enjoying our drinks, when that infamous pen made an appearance. It was our go-to place, comfortable and with a relaxed atmosphere. It also didn't hurt that it was run by one of my cousins, so we always received a family discount. The discounts were enough to show respect without insulting the owner. It was a two-way thing that worked well. The other 2 couples were Carlo and his wife Joanne, and Phil and his wife Terry. Carlo and Joanne were older than us by some 5 years or so. We were distantly related, still family of course. Carlo was a bit old-fashioned and had led an interesting life, not all of which was within the law. He was a great bear of a man, and I remember when Connie first met him, she was terrified. But Carlo was a kind and gentle man, except when you upset him. One word, don't. Carlo was like an older brother to me, always there for me, and had dealt with a problem or 2 with ease. His wife Joanne was a lovely lady, adoring Carlo. They were a perfect match. He was big, and she was small, pretty, but also feisty. Joanne was the only person Carlo was afraid of, and he didn't hide how much he adored her. All seemed good, except for the fact that Terry, Phil's wife, sometimes acted distant and standoffish. Recently, though, she seemed to snap out of it and become part of the group. I had mentioned to Connie that something seemed off with Terry, but she dismissed it as just women's issues. That Terry didn't want to explain. As we sat in the lounge area, sipping our drinks and chatting, Carlo and Joanne joined us. We hugged, and the waiter promptly brought fresh drinks to our table. Connie and I always marveled at how we were taken care of wherever we went. My cousin knew we were a party of 6 and had our table ready. We were shown to our secluded corner table with a view of the door, something Carlo always preferred. We didn't ask why. Is Phil and Tara coming? Joanne asked Connie. I spoke to her earlier. She said they were definitely coming but might be running a little late as Phil hadn't gotten home yet. Carlo looked at the 2 women and gave me a knowing look. I looked back, and he subtly shook his head. I let it go, but I made a mental note to ask Carlo about it later. As we finished our meal, we moved back to the lounge area where the music started playing. The girls couldn't wait to hit the dance floor and burn off some calories. The crowd was busy tonight, nothing out of control, just people having fun. The girls came back to the table after the first dance, gulping their drinks as the music changed to a slower pace. That was our cue to join them on the dance floor. Connie pressed against me, moving her body suggestively. As I looked around the room, I noticed Connie talking animatedly with Phil across the room. My mind registered it as another oddity of the evening, but I decided to ask her about it later. We said our goodbyes and got into separate taxis to go home. As we rode in the taxi, I looked around and caught Connie still chatting with Phil. They seemed intense yet trying to appear casual at the same time. Something wasn't right, but I didn't want to ruin the night by bringing it up. I decided to contact Carlo in the morning instead. Next morning, Connie got up and headed out the door for an early morning session at the gym. I pottered round the house as I drank glass after glass of orange juice to help clear my head. I sat at my laptop and Googled the hotel that was inscribed on the pen I had seen in her handbag. The search came back and I checked the location. It was across London from us, but easy to get to. There was on-site parking. It looked very fancy, really. I took down the telephone numbers and email address anyway, but saw they also had a facility to book online too. I would need to check the history to see if there was anything there. I checked. Nothing at all. The history was wiped clean. I sensed something suspicious. My paranoia was getting out of control. I called Carlo. Carlo, it's Sal. So what is going on with Phil and Terry? I get the impression you know something. Do I need to be concerned? Sal, meet me at my brother's bar around midday. I will fill you in then with what I know. Best not do it over the phone, okay? Sure, I will be there. Sal, come alone, okay? Yes, of course I understand. The line went dead. Now I was concerned. Did I need to be? Darn it, I was worried. I sat staring at the phone as my stomach started to churn slowly. I did not like the feeling I was getting inside. Connie bounced through the door an hour or so later. She looked refreshed. Her hair was still damp from her shower, and she had a rosy glow to her cheeks. Good workout? I asked. Yes, it was great. I needed that, babe. She threw her handbag on the table and tossed her gym bag onto the floor. I am going over to see Carlo later. He wants to talk about something or other. Shouldn't be too long, though. What does he want, Sal? He still gives me the creeps sometimes, even though he is a nice guy. Yes, he is a great friend, but I for one would not like to be on the wrong side of him in any way, and don't ever confuse him with a nice guy. I won't be long, love, okay? Connie looked at me, another look I couldn't read. What is going on? Everyone around me is giving off vibes that are starting to worry me. I slid into my car and drove slowly across town to Carlo's brother's place. A large, unremarkable building that housed a fancy and trendy bar in North London. Well, not exactly your typical bar, either really more of a members-only drinking club, or for those in the know anyway. Before I could press the entry buzzer, the door opened and Carlo stood aside, ushering me in. As he did, he gave a quick look outside, as if to see if I had been followed. I watched him with curiosity. Okay, Carlo, what the heck is going on? Your call has gotten me spooked, and what with a few other things that have been happening, I am getting concerned, and I don't know what to be concerned about, if anything. He looked me in the eye and said, "Follow me." I followed him through the bar and into the back rooms where there was an office set up like a study. He closed the door behind me, and we sat on opposite sides of a large oak desk. Sal, I care about you very much, so I want you to listen to me carefully. I promised your old man that I would always look out for you. I don't break my word. What I will tell you is going to hurt, but you must hear me out, okay? I shuddered inside as I saw pain in his eyes, my mind starting to race with possibilities, but deep in my gut, I knew it had something to do with my wife. My heart started to race in my chest. This man had been close to me all my life. I knew my dad was as close to him as if he were his own son. He was a cousin but had lived with us since he was a child. I knew little of his parents, but only that they were killed together. My father acted immediately and took him in. From then on, he was like a brother to me. He opened the top drawer of the desk he was sitting at and pulled out a large manila envelope. Carefully, he slid it across the desk towards me. My eyes were fixed on it, as if it were a dangerous animal about to strike. I knew instinctively that by opening the envelope, my life would be forever changed. As I slowly reached towards it, Carlo's hand slammed down on top of it. Startled, I looked up and saw pain in his eyes again. "It's bad, isn't it?" He looked at me and held my gaze. A slight nod was all he gave me. "Sal, remember I am here for you, okay?" He lifted his big hand and I brought the envelope towards me. I lifted it up and I could feel the weight of it. It seemed so full of hurt. Carlo watched me as I pulled the contents from its hiding place inside the envelope. Once in the open, its hurt was visible and started its work on my mind and my heart. Sal, are you okay?" I continued looking through the pictures, each one stabbing at my heart. The pain in my chest was growing as I saw my marriage fall apart right in front of my eyes. I looked up at Carlo, my face wet with tears. "What? How? When did you? Who is he?" My eyes wide with shock, fear, and a bit of anger as well. "Sal, I heard a rumor a few weeks ago that Connie was up to something. I had no evidence until a couple of days ago, just before we all went out the other evening, actually. I know some things for sure, but there are still things I am working on, okay? As for the how, a friend of mine recognized her when he saw her in a restaurant in South London. He thought the guy she was with was a little too friendly to be treating a married woman like that in public. Sal, they thought they were out of the area and safe, I think. The man is Tony Drew. Yes, you should know him. He is Phil's brother." I sat transfixed as his words started to sink in. Images flashed through my mind of our evening out, the looks between Phil and Connie, and then with Terry too. It was adding up. I found a pen from one of the hotels across London. Is that where they? "Yes, Sal, I am really sorry, pal, but my guy followed them there at the start of last week. You were on an overnighter, I understand. The first meeting was also when you were away too." I looked at him. My heart was now hardening, my fist tightly clenched and balled up tight. "I am going to confront the jerk," I exclaimed. "Easy, Sal, that could get you into a world of trouble, and she isn't worth getting in trouble for, and neither is he. Divorce her and get rid of her and let me deal with him." "No, Carlo, as much as I respect you, I cannot allow that. I need to confront that guy myself, and he needs to know it was me too." "Is he married? Do you know where he lives, works, and all that?" "I do have some information that is in the envelope that will answer that, Sal, but don't do anything impulsive. We need to plan this carefully, and we don't want to end up in jail either, right? He isn't married, but from what I can find, he is divorced. Has no kids, but he does have a liking for women, especially the ones who are already married. Maybe he doesn't want any commitment or something. Either way, he shouldn't have messed with our relationship. He will regret it." His eyes went cold as he said that. I was in no doubt that this was not going to end well for Connie's lover. "Okay, so what do you have in mind?" I was still breathing hard and fast, but slowly getting control of my anger, well, as much as I could anyway. He poured me a soda before he answered me. "How well do you get on with your friend Phil? Reason I ask is he was behaving a little odd at the restaurant with Terry and your wife too. I was watching him. I think he knows what is going on. If that is the case, can you call him a friend any longer?" "I saw that too. I am wondering if his wife is in on it too, the way they seem to be acting. I don't see any sense in hanging around longer than necessary, Sal. I think we should bring the hammer down as soon as possible. But before that, you need to get the ball rolling with a lawyer. That is, if you want to get rid of her, or are you going to try to make it up with her? If it was a one-off thing, then maybe. But seeing this, I just can't get through that. This is all too much. The pictures will stay in my mind every time I look at her. No, I can't forgive or forget." "I understand. But that being the case, you need to start to protect yourself now. It may take a little while, but if you plan it first, you will at least get some payback, and believe me, you need that. I need to think on this, Carlo. I want them both to suffer though, really suffer too." He leaned forward and slipped a business card in front of me. "Divorce guy, he is ruthless. He doesn't take prisoners either, strictly get rid of EM, no messing. I have already primed him on your situation. All you need to do is give him a call and say go, and he will be at it. Believe me, he is good. He is also a cousin." He laughed at that. We had cousins all over the place. I couldn't help but smile. We sat for another hour until we had a plan of action. I called Carlo's cousin, and he started that ball rolling. We agreed not to have her served until everything was ready. In the meantime, I needed to find out how involved Phil and his wife Terry were in this somehow. I left Carlo and slowly drove back towards home, my scrambled brain fighting to maintain a grip on my sanity. I held the steering wheel so tight I am sure my fingerprints were left on it. I parked my car and trudged towards the door. As I stepped inside, I couldn't hear any sound at all. Connie had gone out. I found a note on the kitchen table. It read, "Gone over to Terry's back later. Love you XXX." I screwed it up and tossed it in the bin. I called Carlo. "She has gone out to see Terry, so she says." "I know, she is at Phil and Terry's place now, but Terry isn't there, just Phil. I have a guy tailing her as we discussed. He will stay with it as long as we need him to, okay?" "Sure, so where is Terry then?" "That is, if she was who she was going to see. If anything turns up, Sal, I will let you know on your mobile, okay?" I sat and looked at the clock. It was 3 hours later that Connie arrived back home. "Hi, lover, how was your day?" She breezed in and hugged me as she headed to the kitchen. "Was okay. Carlo had something he wanted to discuss with me is all. We are working on a plan to deal with it, though." She looked at me expecting me to give her some details, but I didn't. I wanted her to ask. A minute later, she did just that. "It's just a personal matter with a cousin that needs sorting out. He thinks his wife is making a fool of him, so he wanted some advice, really." I smiled at her, taking in the change of expression as she tried to hold her casual smile. "I am sure it will work out, though." She turned away, but I knew I had rattled her just a little anyway. The rest of the weekend passed slowly. I couldn't bring myself to have a deeper conversation with her as much as I wanted to. I kept seeing the photos that Carlo had shown me of her and that jerk Tony. I couldn't understand how she could do it with him and act normally around me too. She was a far better liar and actress than I could ever have thought. I hugged her. Words filled me with happiness. I had the image of her with Tony in my mind too. But I chose to focus on the love we shared. We lay quietly in our bed, each with our own thoughts. I felt hurt and vulnerable that Connie could deceive me like she did. I was disappointed and confused. I slipped out of bed as soon as she was asleep and went downstairs. I poured a glass of juice and sat at my computer. I saw a message from Carlo pop up. I checked the time. It was a little after 1 a.m. "All the wheels are turning here and everything is in place as we discussed." "Okay," I thought, "all I need to do now is create a short overnight trip for Wednesday, and we are go." I messaged him back, "Okay." I slid back into bed an hour later. I tried to sleep, but the anger was not helping me. Eventually, I drifted off and managed a few fitful hours of not-so-good sleep. I crawled out of bed and showered before dressing and going downstairs. Connie met me with a smile and breakfast, coffee and toast. She was moving a little gingerly this morning. She saw me looking and smiled. She sat down and sipped her coffee. "I have to stop over in Leeds on Wednesday. Will you be okay?" She looked at me over her cup. I could almost see her mind working. "Just the one night?" she asked casually. "Yes, but won't be back until late Thursday night, though." "Is this something to do with Carlo?" "Yes, and that cousin I told you about. It's nothing really, but he may need some support. Carlo gives me the creeps. I am not sure what kind of support he could offer, though. You will be surprised at how good a friend he can be, but I wouldn't like to get on his wrong side, related or not. He has a knack of sorting out problems, too." I watched her face pale slightly, but her mind was still working on a plan. I could see it. I looked at my watch and stood to leave for the day. "I have to get going, sweetheart. See you later and be good while I am away." I pulled out of the garage and headed down the road. I headed for my appointment with my attorney and spent an hour with him going through the options and signing papers for him. He was on the ball and had gotten copies of the envelope's contents already. He confirmed he would have everything ready for Wednesday afternoon for me to collect. I went to the bank and moved all the money from our savings into a new account in my name only, as well as sending a large amount to Carlo to hold on my behalf too. The current account was left as it stood. It covered all the bills, so there was little or no extra money held there. I emptied our safety deposit box of cash and jewelry and opened a new account in my name only at another bank. I also stopped her allowance, which fed her own account. That would hit her quickly, and by the end of the month she would be in trouble, I was sure. Satisfied, I went into my office and dealt with the routine daily tasks. My secretary, Sadie, was a great help, and I knew she could run the ship without me and do a far better job at it too, I thought. In a lull between signing papers, I caught her looking at me. I sighed and spun my chair round to face her directly. I had known her for almost 5 years. She had been nothing but professional at all times and fiercely loyal to the point of being protective, it felt. She was always polite and cool with Connie, but there was an undercurrent between them, I was sure. Connie had mentioned her attitude several times towards her, but I always brushed that off as a woman's issue and between them. I looked at her oval face. Her piercing dark blue eyes stared at me with concern. I knew I had to say something. I felt the need to tell someone something. I was cracking up inside and she knew it. I took a deep breath as I tried to gather my thoughts and harness my emotions. Sadie, there are things going on that may cause some disruption this week, so if I am not around, you know what to do to keep things running. Okay? Yes, boss, you can rely on me. Anything I can help you with? Sadie was a married woman in her 40s, a smart and elegant woman who I trusted implicitly. I looked at her as she seemed to read my innermost thoughts. Connie is acting suspicious. You're kidding me. Oh my gosh, Sal, that's terrible. Are you sure? I mean, do you know for sure? I just nodded slowly. She saw the buildup of tears in my eyes and closed the gap between us. She hugged me tightly as she stood beside me. I could feel the love from this woman in that hug, and I knew that was what was missing at home. I sobbed for the first time since I had found out a few short days ago. She held me until I managed to get control again. She held my face in her hands and looked into my eyes. Sal, you are a good man. Don't let anyone tell you different, okay? What are you going to do? I am assuming divorce and confront Connie too. Well, yes, something like that, but I don't want to involve you or anyone else, Sadie, please understand. Don't do anything foolish, Sal. Please be careful. The rest of the day was tough. But Sadie was worth her weight in gold by the way she looked after me. Her husband is a lucky guy. She fended off all comers and just dealt with any nonsense in her own inimitable way. I heard her at one point tell someone to just go away. I smiled at that. It was so good to have good people around me like her. At home, I sat with Connie watching TV when the phone rang. She took it out into the hallway to answer. I could hear her talking quietly, but not enough to make out what was going on. After about 5 minutes, she returned. What's up? I asked curiously. Oh, nothing, just Terry going on about her and Phil having another argument about nothing important as usual. I just wish they would either make up or split. They are driving me crazy. What do you mean? Are they having big problems? Phil never mentioned it. I watched her face for anything that would give her away. Well, it is something and nothing really, I think. I am sure they will work it out. Was that what was going on when we were at the restaurant? Connie looked at me nervously. She wasn't aware I had noticed anything between them and indeed her part in it too. Now she had started this series of lies and was getting tangled up in them. I smiled inwardly at her discomfort but still couldn't work out what Terry and Phil's part was in this, unless it was unrelated. Yes, they had had an argument before going out, and then it sort of simmered all evening. Is that what you were doing with Phil? She shuddered visibly. I mean, trying to help them sort out their argument? Yes, Terry asked me to speak to Phil is all. So what was it all about, Connie? Maybe I can help. I smiled inwardly as I watched my wife start to tie herself in knots. It's okay, Sal. I am sure they have it almost sorted out now. Good, glad to hear that. I don't like the thought of a friend's marriage in trouble. He isn't cheating, is he? No, nothing like that. Her face was getting flushed now. Is it Terry that has been acting unfaithful then? Look, Sal, I don't know, okay? Let's mind our own business and leave them to it. She snorted. My thoughts exactly, but I may mention it to Phil when I see him just to check if he is okay though. Her eyes narrowed as I looked back at the TV, apparently finished with the conversation. A few minutes later, I casually asked her. So if neither is cheating and Terry asked you to speak to Phil, what was that about? Sal, for goodness sake, leave it. She got up from the sofa and stormed out of the room. I sat back giggling. I know I had gotten under her skin now. All I needed to find out now was what was the other couple's role in this. The rest of the evening we spent cautiously avoiding each other. It seemed to satisfy us both, and very little was said. I decided that I would drop by Phil and Terry tomorrow and stir the pot some at their end. This was risky, of course. It could tip my wife off that I knew what was going on, but I couldn't resist even a small yank on their chains. I was up early the next day, Tuesday, and headed out the door as Connie came down the stairs. She was still groggy, but I hugged her as I passed her on my way to the garage. Can't stop, love. Need to get moving. I have a lot to do before going off tomorrow. Love, yeah. Connie stood looking confused as I disappeared through the doorway, and a few seconds later she heard my car pull out of the driveway and drive off down the road. After pouring herself a coffee, she sat thinking about Tony. Things had been so cool until this past week or so. She had met Tony one evening a few months ago when she had been out with Terry. They were in a small club with another couple of friends when he walked in. Seeing his sister-in-law, he approached the group and smiling offered to get them all a drink. The girls all smiled at the handsome guy as he checked them all out. Terry had noticed that Tony and Connie had made eye contact and something passed between them. "Stay away from Tony, he is a real jerk. He has even come on to me before now. He will go after anything with a pulse, especially a married pulse too. No worries there, Terry, I have my Sal, but he is rather a smooth, good-looking guy. Weren't you even a little tempted?" Terry shook her head at her friend. One word, don't. Terry had done her duty as a friend, but saw something going on behind her friend's eyes that she didn't like. The rest of their evening had passed without incident as far as she saw anyway. Tony had cornered Connie and slipped her his number, however. During the following few days, Tony had somehow managed to get Connie's number and called a couple of times and spent a few innocent minutes chatting and flirting. By the time of her next girls' night out, she knew Tony would be there again. This time there was some dancing involved, and as soon as Tony had her in his arms, he started to work on her. He poured flattery and compliments all over her, lots of little touches as they chatted. It was only when Terry grabbed her elbow that she realized that she had spent the entire evening with him. She left the club with her friend, who was roundly telling her off and urging her to stop this before anything bad happened. Connie was still not listening and brushed off her warning, stating that nothing had happened anyway. As Terry led her away, Tony smiled. He wanted Connie and was going to have her sooner or later, he was certain of that. For the next few weeks, the phone calls became regular and the flirting intensified. Things changed when Terry had to cancel their regular night out, and Tony saw an opportunity during one of their calls. He managed to convince Connie to meet him at the club alone, just as friends, of course. Connie had thought about it, and now the opportunity had presented itself. She grabbed it and a little too quickly agreed to meet him. She had dressed as she normally did to meet Terry, but this was different. She felt different. She was not just excited but thrilled. Something within her was churning with excitement and driving her like a moth to a flame. She could not stop it, not that she wanted to anyway. She had been chatting with Tony and they had built a relationship, or so it felt to her, and now she was ready to take it to the next level. That night was a major scare for Connie, yet when she got in, Sal was asleep. She crept into bed and hoped to pass it off in the morning. An uneasy night followed. She couldn't help but smile to herself. It was so exciting. The next few weeks saw Connie canceling on the odd girls' night out to meet Tony, as well as seeing him during the day whenever she could. Terry had figured out what Connie was up to after several weeks and warned her friend to stop before she got caught. She had even argued with her husband Phil over it and wanted him to talk to Tony to make him stop before everything blew up. Terry told Connie to cool it and said that she had also spoken to Tony and got Phil to get involved as well. But Tony was unapologetic, arrogant, and dismissive towards Terry and his brother. Phil was torn between his loyalty to his brother and his friend Sal. Things became more challenging when Connie confronted him at the restaurant, causing tension with his wife. He felt trapped with no easy way out. The longer it went on, the harder it became to find a solution without causing a major problem. Connie knew that it had to end soon, realizing that the risks she was taking only added to the appeal of continuing the affair. It was risky, and if Sal ever found out, it would cause chaos. The incident at the restaurant was too close for comfort, and with Sal constantly questioning what was happening, things were definitely spiraling out of control. She sat sipping her coffee, replaying her affair in her mind, and felt a strong attraction towards Tony. There was something about him and the way they connected that drew her in. However, she decided that it would end tomorrow. It would be the last time. She had to call it off, but they would have one more night together. It gave her some relief knowing that a decision had been made, but she still had to convince Tony. Late in the evening, I returned home, having spent the whole day trying to pass the time. The plans were all in place. I had the papers from my lawyer in my car, and the official documents would be delivered by registered mail. I felt tense and went straight for my trusty bottle of JD, pouring a large glass. Connie watched me, sensing that I was dealing with my own problems too. "Are you okay, Sal?" I didn't answer right away, taking another sip of my drink. I turned to her and looked into her eyes. She seemed scared and uneasy. "Just had a rough day, love. I need to take a shower and then get ready for this thing with Carlo tomorrow." I walked past her and hurried up the stairs before she realized that I hadn't hugged her. She didn't like the atmosphere, and it frightened her. She knew why though, and tomorrow it would all come to an end. She wondered what I meant by having to prepare for tomorrow. She realized that she no longer knew anything about what I was doing. I stood under the hot shower, tears streaming down my face as my heart broke for my marriage, my wife, and the future. After 30 minutes, the water had cleansed me, but I still felt no better. My heartache was overwhelming. I wanted to run away and hide. I was shaking, unsure if I could hold it together much longer. Once I stepped out of the shower, I dried and dressed in casual clothes before heading downstairs. Connie watched me enter the kitchen, and I had managed to regain control and put on a strong front. She seemed to relax a bit, trying to compose herself as well. We both knew something was wrong, but avoided asking the questions that would make it all come crashing down. "What's for dinner?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I thought we could order in tonight. I don't feel like cooking." "Sure, no problem. How about Chinese?" "Yes, that sounds good." I made the call, and as we waited, we sat in the living room with the TV murmuring in the background. Like two fighters in a ring, we eyed each other cautiously, not wanting to have the confrontation that hung in the air. Dinner was quiet, almost tense. "What time do you have to leave in the morning?" she asked, casual but with a hint of curiosity. "I'll be out around 9 a.m. We have a flight booked for 11, so there's no need to rush. The only problem is, we won't get to meet with the issue until tomorrow evening, but it will be nice to finally meet Carlo's cousin. You know how families can be." It was already approaching 10 p.m., and I thought I saw her glance at the clock. "I need to get some rest, love. Tomorrow will be a long day." I got up, drained my glass, and set it on the table. I looked across at her, sensing a touch of sadness in her eyes. She stood and closed the distance between us. "I want you to know, Connie, that I have always loved you more than anyone else." I held her tightly. She felt my embrace and her heart filled with a mix of sadness and guilt. Tomorrow it would all be over, she thought to herself, and then I can make it up to him. I was thinking almost the same thing. I woke up to the scent of freshly brewed coffee, a smell I had always loved in the morning. It reminded me of my grandmother's house. There was always coffee brewing. It was strong and dark, nothing compared to it. I floated down the stairs towards the powerful aroma, and Connie was waiting with a large mug in her hand. Silence filled the kitchen as we drank our coffees, watching each other but quickly looking away before being caught. The tension was palpable, and we both wished it could just be over. I glanced at my watch. "I have to get going, lover. I need to be at Carlo's to pick him up." I stood and placed my cup on the drying rack after finishing it. I took a deep breath and felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I held back a sob as I tried to hold it together. I looked at Connie and saw that she too was trying to remain composed. It was incredibly tense. "She must know that I know, right?" She looked up at me, smiling as I passed by. "Have a safe trip, Sal. Hurry back." I watched as she eased past me and gave me a polite hug. Grabbing my overnight bag, I walked towards the garage. With a huge sigh of relief, Connie closed the door behind me and picked up the phone a few minutes later. "He's gone." "Are you still good for tonight?" "Oh yes, baby, definitely. We'll make it a great night too." I had to tell Phil to back off though, Tony. He's been getting on my nerves lately. Has he said anything to you? "Yes, but I told him to leave us alone, along with his annoying wife. She's been bothering me too, but she won't say anything." "I know that." "Well, it won't stop us, baby. I'm really looking forward to tonight." I asked my friend to get us the same room as before, so everything is set. "Room 415, okay? Just pick up the key at the front desk, and I'll see you there at 8, okay?" "Okay, got it. I'll call you later." They hung up, and the man listening in on their conversation smiled. He sent a text with the details of their meeting to someone before packing up his equipment and leaving his post. Carlo received the text and smiled grimly at me. Sitting in his study, I winced at my wife's heartlessness as he went over the plan for tonight. "Are you sure about this, Sal? I have to ask before things go too far. You know where this will all end, right?" I looked at my friend, seeing the deep concern in his eyes and hearing the warning in his words. "Carlo, I loved that woman like I've never loved anyone before or will ever again. I gave her everything, and I can't let this go. I have to do something that will make her realize what she's done and that she'll pay for it forever, along with her lover. I just have to. Carlo, you understand?" Carlo nodded sadly, feeling the pain in my eyes and hearing it in my voice. He reached into his desk drawer and retrieved a revolver, sliding it across the desk towards me. I looked at it, wide-eyed, taking in every detail of the weapon that would solve part of my problem. Only take it if you're absolutely sure, Sal. We'll do what needs to be done to ensure he understands the consequences of his actions and to discourage him from doing something like this again. The gun is just to make a point, okay? I watched as Sal nodded silently and held the gun. It felt lighter in his hand, bringing back memories from long ago. Carlo watched as I loaded the pistol with ease, my movements calculated. I laid the gun back on the desk. Ready to go, Sal? I nodded. Okay, we have some time to kill, so let's grab some food, and I'll fill you in on all the details. I was thinking of stopping by Terry and Phil's place at some point to find out how much they know and why they neglected to tell me. I would leave that alone. If they realize you know, it will provide the police with evidence of motive before the fact. For now, it's best to leave it alone. There will be time later, don't worry. We walked out of the bar and I was introduced to Carlo's brother, Alfredo. Nice to finally meet you, Sal. He smiled and shook my hand. The three of us sat and chatted, enjoying each other's company. Soon a waitress entered with plates of food, perfectly timed without any word exchanged. The young waitress smiled at me and leaned in before leaving. Hello, Sal. My Uncle Carlo has told me a lot about you. Nice to meet you, I'm Alicia. Alfredo smiled, ushering his daughter away. Sal, I apologize for my daughter's impulsive behavior. They're headstrong these days. Alfredo, it's my pleasure to meet you and any member of your family. We've missed out on getting together for too long. Family is everything, as I'm sure you know. Please send my regards to your wife and the rest of your family as well. Alfredo smiled, thank you, I will. Lunch was taken leisurely with the backdrop of customers filing in and causing a warm hubbub of noise behind them. Considering what they were discussing, it was unreal yet strangely relaxing as Sal felt at ease and safe. His mobile phone went off just after 3 in the afternoon. He looked at the screen and saw it was Connie. Hi Connie, what's up? I called to see if you had got there okay, is all. Everything okay? How is Carlo and his little issue? We are both fine, thanks for asking. We are here, but just having a late lunch before moving on. What do you have planned for tonight, love? He asked the question as he would normally, but he also wanted to hear her lie again. I am going over to see Terry. I think things are okay there now. That's good. I was going to give Phil a call later anyway. I think he will be out this evening with his brother, I understand. I have never met him. What is he like? Oh, well, I only met him the once. He seems rather nice as far as I could tell anyway. A bit like Phil, really. I have to run here, Connie. We have a hotel to get into before our meeting this evening, so have a nice evening and give my regards to Terry. Okay, love you, bye, baby. Bye. As he ended the call, Carlo looked at him and noticed the pain but also something else, anger, a deep burning anger. Something he knew very well, and the one thing that had set him on the path he had taken in life, until he met Joanne and she did something to him that had never happened before. She made him fall in love with her. Okay, Sal? Yes, looks like we are ready to go. The men raised their glasses and toasted each other, downing their drinks in one go. Time to get some rest before showtime. Let's go meet the guys. They left Alfredo in the bar and headed into the private quarters. There they found a group of 4 men who all greeted them, shaking Sal by the hand and giving Carlo big bear hugs. Sal, these are very good friends of mine. I trust them with my life and have done so many times in the past. They will not let you down. Looking at the men, Sal could see they were all a few years older than him and appeared weathered. They all had the same determined eyes and seemed strong and focused. He felt a shiver run through him as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Still want to go through with this, Sal? Carlo asked calmly. Yes, I don't just want to do this, I need to. Sal looked at the men, who all gave him small smiles as if they understood the magnitude of it for him too. Okay guys, is everything ready? All checked? Cars in place? The van? Access to the hotel and the escape routes? Removal? For the next 30 minutes, the plan and all the details Carlo mentioned were thoroughly reviewed until everyone was satisfied it was ready. Sal paced back and forth, his tension rising and his anger building inside. He wasn't sure if he could contain it much longer. The thought of Connie preparing to meet Tony twisted his gut, and he wanted to release his frustration on something or someone. Carlo stepped in front of him, blocking his path, and wrapped his strong arms around him. Easy, Sal. We'll be on the move soon. It will get easier, son. Tears welled up in Sal's eyes as frustration, anger, and a sense of betrayal and loss consumed him. Carlo paced with him while the other men looked on, their sympathy radiating towards Sal as a form of support. They all took turns talking and pacing with Sal for the next hour, knowing that they needed him to be fully committed to the plan as well. A phone rang, breaking the heavy atmosphere, and all heads turned towards the sound. Carlo picked up his mobile. Yes, they all strained to hear anything. Okay, good, we will be moving in 5 minutes. Sal looked at the clock. It was already past 8 o'clock. The time had slipped away. The men left the room, heading towards their car to pick up a van closer to their destination. Carlo looked at Sal, concern in his eyes. Sal, last chance. You don't have to do this, you know. Yes, I do. That jerk has disrespected me and my family. I need to teach him a lesson he will never forget, and I absolutely intend to do just that. Good man. Carlo slapped Sal on the shoulder with a meaty hand as they left through the back door and got into a parked Mercedes that had been arranged for them. And this is where my story brings us now, parking the Mercedes in a side street, not 200 yards from the hotel. We sat in silence as a text pinged on Carlo's phone just after 9 p.m. He looked at it and nodded to me. They have arrived. I felt my heart sink. Carlo saw my reaction, his hand on my shoulder holding me in touch with reality and trying to pull me back from the thoughts whirling in my head. Let's stick to the plan, Sal, okay? I looked across at him and nodded. I knew we had to wait at least another hour before making our move. Another text came through. The team is in position. Carlo smiled nervously at me. Their role was vital in ensuring we could enter and exit the hotel undetected, or as undetected as possible. We sat and reviewed our plan, with Carlo reminding me once again not to let my emotions get out of control. We don't want to create a huge commotion and get ourselves into trouble because of those two jerks, understand? His icy gaze bore into mine, conveying the message loud and clear. This was not the time to mess things up. Okay, Carlo, I won't do anything stupid like shooting the guy in bed. I'm not that foolish. I grinned at him as he playfully slapped me on the head. Don't mess around, Sal. This is serious. Stay focused and keep a grip on yourself. Got it? I nodded. We sat in silence until another text lit up Carlo's phone. We are in. Exit is secure. Carlo checked the dashboard clock. It was almost time. My heart began to race, and my breathing quickened. Carlo pulled out brass knuckles from the glove compartment and quietly opened the car door. You saw me looking. Just to be safe, okay? Let's go. In an instant, I was following him as we headed for the lobby of the hotel. We casually walked through the door, making sure to avoid eye contact and blending in with the other residents. I did my best to relax and stay composed, but my nerves were on edge. We stood, waiting for the elevator to reach the ground floor. The elevator chimed and the doors opened slowly. We had to step aside as a couple exited before we stepped inside and stood calmly as the doors closed. Silently, we watched the floor numbers climb towards the 4th floor. Too soon, we arrived, and the doors opened at a snail's pace. My heart was pounding now. Carlo exited first, leading me to the room. I saw the numbers 415 on the door, and I knew my wife was just on the other side of it with another man. As we approached the door, the other 4 men appeared as if out of thin air. They were dressed in hotel-style uniforms, complete with woolly hats that could easily be pulled down to avoid recognition. I knew at least one of them had a taser. I looked around and saw no one in the corridor. Carlo pointed out the neutralized CCTV, and we estimated we had about 5 minutes before anyone would notice something was amiss. We stood back as the men positioned themselves in front of the door. One of them inserted the key card into the lock, and we all watched as the light turned green and heard the click of the door unlocking. Slowly, the door swung open. We were already familiar with the room's layout, knowing that the bedroom was at the end of a short hallway off the living area. We swiftly made our way towards the bedroom, passing through the living room where I recognized my wife's lingerie and dress strewn on the floor. My heart sank even lower, and my chest tightened as I realized I had witnessed it all before. Silently, we approached the open door of the bedroom. We could all hear the noises from inside. My face flushed, and the men avoided eye contact, their empathy palpable. They were consummate professionals. The plan was for the men to enter first and swiftly remove the scumbag from the room. Then it would be my turn to confront the woman. The unsuspecting couple did not hear or see the men entering the room. It was the noise of the laundry cart that eventually caught their attention. Tony turned his head slightly, his eyes widening as he realized there were intruders. That moment, the taser hit him in the backside, causing his body to arch and jerk as he tried to escape the electric shock coursing through him. Connie screamed as she felt him convulse on top of her, unaware of what was happening to her lover. It all happened so quickly the men were efficient at their job. Tony was swiftly bundled out of the room, wheeled away in the laundry cart. Connie tried to get up, but she found her hands and feet tightly bound with tape. I switched on the overhead light and entered the room. I looked at my wife on the bed. She looked at the masked men standing looking down at her. I pulled out the toy gun and pointed it at her face. She cringed and tried to hide, screwing her eyes tightly as she cried and mumbled. I got real close, pressing the muzzle to her temple, not saying a word as I looked into her eyes. I saw the fear. I let it linger and fester. I wanted her to be scared. She should be scared. I could blow her brains out, and I really felt like doing it, but not yet, but maybe. She needed to suffer first. I felt Carlo looking at me. This was the point. He was worried about me losing it. I knew that. I tapped Connie on the head. She opened her eyes wider as I pointed the barrel between her eyes as she looked into mine. I slowly squeezed the trigger. She could see my finger tensing and somehow relaxed oddly. Carlo started to move, but before he could, I pulled the trigger. Connie had closed her eyes. I was wild with love, hate, and every feeling possible. Rage was uppermost. As Carlo grabbed for my hand, the hammer came down with a loud click. Connie had wet herself soaking the bed. Carlo wrenched the gun from my hand. He looked at me with his steely eyes, and after breathing a big sigh, he started to laugh. His eyes were all that were visible, but they told the story. He was pissed. Connie was crazy with fear and then shock as she stared at the two men in front of her staring down at her. She started to shake her head wildly from side to side. The tears were flowing now too. I looked at her in disgust. She stared wide-eyed at the two silent men in front of her. Not a word had been said in the preceding 2 minutes it took to destroy her evening and possibly the rest of her life. I stood for almost another minute in silence, not moving a muscle as I looked at the person on the bed. Her eyes were locked onto mine. I could taste her fear. I gripped the edge of my mask and pulled it off. She gasped and then fainted. I saw the slight movement from Carlo at my side as he looked at his phone and knew we had to leave. I followed Carlo out the room, leaving Connie spread-eagled on the bed. We slipped down the stairway and used the exit at the rear of the hotel to blend back into the dark city. In a few minutes, we were back at the car. We had not spoken during the walk back, each with our own thoughts. Carlo started the engine, and we drove away, heading to the meeting point. You took the bullets out. You jerk. I was worried for a second there. I thought you had lost it. I laughed grimly. Yes, I wasn't going to go down for hurting her. Just a really good scare will do for now. I think the lesson will come when she sees Tony again. I am sure the guys will do the necessary with him. No need to dirty your hands, Sal. I know it's important to you that he knows you were there, but I think he will remember this for a very long time anyway. One way or another, I need to be certain of that. I stared grimly ahead as we drove through the dark streets towards our destination. We stepped inside the bar and Alfredo was waiting for us. It was almost 1 a.m., so he poured us healthy drinks as we sat in front of the log fire in the back room. Slowly, as the adrenaline faded, we started to feel more like human beings. For the past several hours, I had been in a trance, a state of mind where the real world was kept at bay and where only pain and anger lived. Now, in the warmth of the back room, we sat and ate quietly. Carlo's phone pinged and he read the message and smiled at me. All done and taken care of. The guys are on their way. I know I can't thank them enough for what they have done, but I will never forget this night. Sal, shut up, it is done. You now have other battles to fight. You need to deal with her now. Don't go getting all soft on me, okay? Sure, I understand. No more needed to be said. I remembered we had left her in the hotel. I wondered how she would get home, or what, if anything, she would have to say about her adventure. Well, I had the rest of the day to kill yet before I returned home in keeping with the plan. She now knew that I was aware of her activities, but would she say anything or confess? I doubted it somehow, even with my knowing and catching her at it. There are rooms ready for you both when you are ready. The tiredness seemed to suddenly wash over me as I was shown my room. I took off my clothes and Alfredo took them and disposed of them before I crashed out on the bed. Sleep didn't come easily as I replayed the events of the night and everything that led up to it. I also thought of her and how I last saw her. I was filled with sadness and revulsion at the same time. I had loved the person for so long. She was my everything. Now it was all gone. The only thing left was to face her and see how it broke out between us. I had the divorce papers already in my possession. She would have the official copy delivered to our home later today. By the time I was due to get home, she would have no doubt as to what I knew. I suddenly had the thought that what if she didn't go home? Now she knew it was me at the hotel. She would be terrified to go home for sure. Gosh, I better call and get the papers diverted. Maybe at Terry's place. Yes, she would go there, I was sure. Almost 7 hours or so later, I was woken from my uncomfortable sleep by Alicia. There was a mug of coffee under my nose as she grinned at me. Lunchtime, Sal. You have 30 minutes. Carlo said you have an afternoon flight to catch, so time to get up. Your change of clothes are on the dresser. She patted my shoulder and left the room. Slowly, I eased myself upright and dressed. Looking in the mirror, I saw a face I thought I knew, but it was changed. It was a changed me. I had almost hurt a person last night, and I had watched them being taken away to their fate, but I felt nothing. At this moment in time, I felt no regrets either. Whatever mess had found that person was brought on by themselves. I just hoped it hurt like heck, and for a long time too. I joined the others at the table, and the normality was surreal yet comforting too. We ate, chatted, and even laughed too. All too soon it was time to leave. We gathered our things and strolled to the car. Looking out the window as we pulled away, I waved at the faces watching me leave. There was a mixture of pain and a deep concern showing through. It was comforting in some way. I made a mental promise to return as soon as possible and not leave it so long next time. I drove homeward slowly, the miles ticking away, and like a countdown to a disaster, I felt a sense of dread building. My anger for the moment was gone. Only a big hole remained, which had been filled with love for my spouse. I dropped Carlo off and Joanne came out to meet him. She grabbed him as he got out of the car and hugged him tightly. I felt the lump in my throat grow as she came to me, hugging me tightly. Sal, it will be okay. Understand this. There will be a tomorrow for you. I know things will seem rough for a while, but believe me, you will be okay. I couldn't speak, but Carlo gave me one of his man hugs and I was on my way home to face a difficult situation. Call me later, Sal. I nodded and drove away, trying not to think of anything. I felt blank. I put my key in the door and turned it. The house sounded empty somehow. The heating had kicked in, so it was warm but not so welcoming. No sounds. It was quiet as I strode warily into the living room. Then the kitchen, nothing. I looked at my watch. It was after 6 now. My spouse should have been home. That is, if they were trying to save our marriage. I checked my mobile, no calls or messages. I slumped into a chair in the living room. What a freaking disappointment. I blurted to myself. I could feel my anger starting to rise again. It had been dormant, but now it was waking from the imposed slumber. I looked at the photograph of my spouse and me on the mantel. I felt a surge of rage as I grabbed it and threw it across the room. The heavy silver frame punctured the wall, and the glass shattered as it disintegrated. Screw you, I screamed. I stared at the wall, breathing heavily when I heard the phone chirp into life. I grabbed the handset. Hello, I bellowed into it. Oh, sorry, Is that you, Sal? A female voice shakily asked. Yes, it is now. What do you want? My tone was loud, direct, and furious. It's Terry, Sal, She almost whispered. Yes, Terry, sorry, it's a bad time. What can I do for you? I breathed slower, trying to regain my composure. Well, it's my spouse. She is here and in a bit of a state, really. I can't make out what has happened, but something has, and she is not good. She doesn't want to come home. She thinks you might hurt her somehow. I don't think she should go anywhere right now, and definitely not drive herself. Terry, is she there? I cut in forcefully. Yes, of course she is. Ask her to talk to me. If she won't, that tells me something and should do to you too. Then ask her what happened, see what she says. I listened to some murmuring, and then the voices got a little louder. Terry came back on. She won't say anything, Sal. I am worried about her. Terry, bear with me here. Just tell her that I am coming round to pick her up. See what happens. I heard her tell my spouse what I had said. Then the scream from them was answer enough. Sal, I don't know what to say to you, Terry. I know, okay? What do you mean, Sal? I know it all, Terry. Oh my goodness. I heard Terry relay what I had said. Then another howl filled the earpiece, followed by sobs and more shrieks. Sal, I am so sorry. So am I, Terry. I know all about it. I know about the girls' nights out and the argument you had with Phil over it too. I heard her gasp. Oh my goodness, no. Yes, I do. While I am at it, I know who as well, and when I catch up with that little jerk, he will pay. Believe me. Sal, I am so sorry. Phil couldn't persuade them to stop. We both tried. I know we should have said something to you, but we were caught in a bad situation. Terry was rambling now as she spoke quickly, trying to get all the words out as fast as she could. Terry, I want you and Phil to know that I don't blame you for what she did with Tony. I'm just really disappointed that you didn't tell me sooner. It has definitely hurt our friendship, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Please let Connie know that I won't come get her things. But they will be packed up and ready for her to pick up soon. If she doesn't come get them soon, they will go in the trash. And I mean everything. She doesn't live here anymore. Lastly, I have some papers being delivered for her today, but I've had them sent to your address instead. I had a feeling she might try to run to you. They should be there any minute now. Please tell her to think before she does anything, and especially before she calls me or anyone else. Got it. Okay, Sal. I hung up the phone and let out a slow breath. I felt like I had been holding my breath the whole time I was talking. All the anger and sadness had poured out, and now there was just emptiness. I had said everything I needed to say, at least for now. I was quiet, not screaming or ranting anymore. Inside, though, I still felt a mix of love and hatred for her. I thought back over everything and realized how blind and foolish I had been. The signs were all there. I just didn't see them. The past few days had been exhausting, and now all I wanted to do was rest. The real battle between us was about to begin, and I knew it was going to be personal and painful. I wasn't ready to fight her yet, but I would be soon. There would be no forgiveness or mercy. I sat down and opened a bottle of soda. After pouring it over a glass of ice, I took a sip and relished the taste as it cooled my throat. I sipped the drink and tried to clear my mind, hoping for some peace or maybe even sleep. I slept soundly through the night. When I woke up, my mouth felt dry and my head was a little fuzzy. I showered and went downstairs to make coffee. While waiting for it to brew, I sipped orange juice straight from the carton. I put some bread in the toaster and wandered around the kitchen. It was barely 7:30 when the phone rang. Hello, Sal, it's Carlo. I know it's early, but I just wanted to make sure you're okay and haven't done anything rash. I'm fine, just a headache. She didn't come home last night. She went to Terry and Phil's place. I talked to her and told her everything I know. She knows it's all out in the open now. Haven't heard a word since about 7:30 last night. I thought I would have after she was served, but Terry said she was in a bit of a state when she got there. Carlo chuckled. Well, that's not surprising. Sounds like everything is going as well as it can, Sal. I heard from the guys everything went smoothly with the delivery. We probably won't hear anything about it for a day or two, though. You know what needs to be done? I won't call again until tomorrow. I have some business to take care of today. The family sends their regards, got it? Got it. Talk to you soon, my friend. Take care. Click. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sipped the warm liquid. It helped clear my head from the fog of the previous night. I started thinking about what I needed to do that day. I decided to call my office first and check on things there. I also needed to find a locksmith, deal with the bank, and take care of everything that needed to be done. I couldn't stay with her anymore. The trust was gone, and I couldn't live in constant fear of her cheating. This had to end. I hadn't heard anything from Connie about the papers that were served to her, but I was sure I would hear something soon once she composed herself. Just after 9, there was a soft knock on the door. Here we go, I thought to myself as I went to answer it. I opened the door and saw Terry and Phil standing there. I stood silently, looking at both of them. Terry broke the awkward silence. Sal, we had to come to apologize. It's the least we can do. Can we come in and talk? I stepped back and held the door open as they walked in. I closed the door and pointed them towards the living room. They sat together on the couch while I took a seat across from them in my armchair. All right, what do you want to say? Sal, we are truly sorry. Phil started. I'm sorry too, Phil. I'm sorry that 2 people I thought were my friends couldn't tell me that my wife was cheating. I'm sorry that my wife felt the need to sleep with someone else. Honestly, I'm sorry about a lot of things. I could feel my anger rising again. Sal, we really are sorry. We tried to talk to her, both of them, but they wouldn't listen. I don't know what she was thinking. She's at our place now, still not making any sense. Something bad must have happened yesterday before she came back. Terry pleaded. What do you mean, Terry? All I know is that I had to be away on Wednesday while the papers were being served. I couldn't even bear to look at her. I went to a meeting in Leeds, and then you called me. Is it something between her and her lover, Tony? I wasn't going to say anything about my involvement or give away any information at this point. We don't know. We haven't heard from my brother. Phil said. I called him, but he didn't answer. He's not at his flat either, and Connie doesn't know where he might be. She just mentioned something about being tied up and him leaving her at the hotel. Come on, Phil. She must have said more than that. What the heck happened between them? Did he do something to her? Not that I care anymore. I couldn't care less where that scumbag is, but I will say this much if I ever see him again. He better hope he regrets it for the rest of his life. Got it. And make sure he knows that too. Phil and Terry looked at me, shocked by the intensity of my anger. They had never seen me like this before. Phil especially understood my words and looked visibly shaken by the thought. Anyway, apart from that guy, how is Connie? Did she get served the papers last night? Yes, Sal. She calmed down after a while, but when she was served, it set her off again. She's not making any sense and seems really shaken. When she arrived at our place, she was upset, angry, but most of all, she was scared. She won't say exactly what happened. Good, I thought to myself. I hope she remembers that night and feels the pain every single day from now on. Well, guys, I hate her for what she's done to me. So if she's in pain now, then good, I'm in pain too. She made her choice with that loser, so she can stay with him for all I care. I'm done with her. They looked at me, speechless. They couldn't believe my anger towards Connie. Is there no way you can work things out with her, Sal? I mean, she made a mistake, but you guys were so good together. Can't you at least try to fix things? Divorce is a big step, Sal. Please talk to her before making any rash decisions. She deserves that, at least. Terry's voice cracked as she pleaded with me. I listened and tried to avoid her eyes, which were now filling with tears. She, at least, was showing the emotions of a true friend. I paused, fighting the urge to look away from her gaze. I had always liked Terry, and Phil, too, for that matter. Despite their actions in this mess, I couldn't ignore the seriousness of what Terry was saying. I knew I would need to have a conversation with Connie sooner or later. Okay, I will talk to her, but I want all her things gone first. It will just be her and me. I'll call and let her know when and where. Does that sound good to you? Terry rushed towards me and hugged me tightly, while Phil looked on sheepishly. That's all we can ask, and maybe even more than she deserves. Thank you, Sal. I'll tell her to wait for your call. But please don't leave her hanging for too long. That would be cruel. Phil just looked at me, his face sullen. Sal, I'm sorry, man. My brother is a jerk. I wouldn't blame you one bit. I watched through the window as the two of them left. They quickly got into their car and drove off towards my soon-to-be ex-wife. I sat down and thought over what Terry had said. It was true that I needed to talk to Connie, seriously consider what Terry said. I knew I needed to calm down before I could trust myself around her. I poured another cup of coffee, the strong taste lingering in my mouth. Pouring myself a large glass, I picked up the phone and called Sadie. I spent the next half hour listening to how well she was doing without me. What a woman. Once she was done, she started lecturing me about Connie. It was like listening to my mom all over again. In the end, I was practically ordered to have dinner with Sadie and her husband at their house that evening. By the time I hung up, my ears were still ringing, and I was convinced Sadie was at least half Italian. The rest of the day was spent making changes. Locks were changed, bedrooms rearranged, clothes either packed or thrown away, and photographs removed. I did everything I could think of to cleanse myself of her presence. By the end of the day, my anger was still there, but somewhat appeased. I sat back, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of it all. As I sat, tears flowed freely down my face. I knew I may be acting hastily without talking to Connie, but deep down, I had already made up my mind to end things with her. Everything was in place. All that was left was our final confrontation, knowing it would hurt both of us equally. You betrayed me. How could you do this to me, to us? You've hurt me so much. I sat staring out the window, feeling the pain of my failed marriage. It was difficult to control my anger, but I knew I needed to wait until I was in a better state of mind to confront her. I decided to make the call in the morning when I was more prepared. I had a restless night's sleep. Early in the morning, I received a call from Phil. The sound of the ringing phone startled me awake, jolting my brain into full alertness. Hey? I answered groggily. Sal, it's me, Phil. I just got a call from the hospital. They said my brother has been badly beaten up. He's in stable condition, but his arms, legs, and, well, got seriously hurt. We're not sure of the lasting effects yet. I don't have any more information for you, sorry. I hope you don't expect me to feel sorry for him, Phil. He's lucky I didn't get to him first. If I ever see him, he better watch out. Sal, I understand. I wouldn't blame you if you did confront him. You've always been a loyal friend, and I wish I had been a better friend to you. Remember, it's not your fault. I just thought you should know about Tony. Phil, it's never been your fault. Remember that. Thanks for letting me know. Say hi to Terry for me. Bye. Sure, bye. I hung up the phone and looked out at the peaceful garden. Birds were stopping by the bird feeder, enjoying the food I had put out for them. Watching nature through the glass always had a calming effect on me. And today was no different. I called Carlo on my cell phone to inform him about what happened to Tony. He didn't seem surprised, but he was pleased with the results his guys had achieved. He suggested sending a message to Tony to ensure he behaved, but I thought it best to let Phil pass on my sentiments for now. We ended the call, and I returned to my contemplation of the garden. As I sipped my second cup of coffee for the day, the phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. I listened as Connie's voice came through, filled with faltering apologies. Sal, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry, I need to explain. I need you. Can I come home? I'm so sorry. Her words were punctuated with sobs, and each one twisted my heart as if it were being suffocated. I found myself breathing heavily as the message ended. I knew I had to make the call, but I wanted her to wait, to realize that I wasn't responding to her message. I spent a couple of hours puttering around the house, and as I moved from room to room, I couldn't help but notice the emptiness. Connie's things were gone, leaving gaps and spaces where they used to be. I called Sadie and asked for a couple of guys to come over with a van to remove Connie's belongings. Within an hour, everything I had packed was loaded into the van. I watched as it pulled away, heading towards Connie. I knew that soon enough, my phone would start buzzing as she received her things and realized the consequences of her actions. This was a one-way trip. The phone rang again, and it was Terry. Sal, we have Connie's stuff here. Just letting you know we've received it. The guys said they dropped most of it off at a storage facility. Thanks, Sal. We have the personal items you marked. Connie is still in shock. Did you want to speak to her now or later? Put her on, Terry. Let's get this over with. I waited a few seconds until I heard Connie's fragile voice on the line. Hello, she said, sounding vulnerable. Connie. Oh my God, Sal, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you. Mean you never thought about getting caught, did you? I said harshly. Sal, I save it, Connie. Now you have the answers to all the questions you never bothered asking yourself when you were with that man. Sal, can't we? She started again. Do you really think there's anything you can say to make things right? Well, think again, Connie. Give it your best shot, but I'm not promising anything. I heard her gasp at my blunt response before I ended the call. I leaned back in my chair, her voice echoing in my head. I could feel the pain in her words, but I wondered if she could feel mine. I sat back and reflected on my marriage, remembering the happiness I believed we had. We had our ups and downs, of course, but I was convinced we were happy. I never suspected anything before, but that didn't mean she hadn't cheated in the past. Confusion filled my mind as I grappled with what I knew for sure and the darkness of the unknown that loomed over me. The clock chimed in the hallway, reminding me that it was already past 6. Each chime told me it was now 6:45. Soon, Connie would be here. I needed to regain control over my emotions and prepare for what would likely be the final act of our marriage. When the doorbell rang, it broke me out of my chain of thought and pulled me away from the self-pity I had been sinking into. The melancholy thoughts had gradually consumed me as I tried not to delve too deep into what was to come. Questions begged for answers in my mind. Why? 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 Now, I shook myself free from those dreary thoughts, stepping towards the door. As I opened it, I saw Connie standing there, and her appearance shocked me. It was the first time I had seen her since that night in the hotel. Her hair, neatly brushed and pulled back, made her look gaunt. She wore little makeup, which accentuated her pale complexion. Her shoulders sagged, and she seemed smaller somehow. She entered the living room, and I followed, noticing the changes that a few days had brought upon her. I watched her as she glanced around the room, gasping softly and stifling a sob as she noticed the gaps on the walls where photographs and memories used to be. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes with her hand covering her mouth. Gone, I said coldly. If you search the rest of the house, you'll see many empty spaces. I paused before continuing. She kept her gaze on me, tears rolling down her cheeks. I didn't realize, Sal. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't think. I know, but this is the result of your betrayal, your affair, your cheating on me with another man. I hope you're satisfied, I said, each word packed with sincerity and anger, hitting her directly in her soon-to-be ex-wife. She sat on the sofa, and I poured her a strong drink, handing it to her while remaining emotionally distant. She sipped it as her teary eyes met mine. I swirled the ice in my glass before taking a sip, studying her. Okay, Connie, let's hear it. What do you have to say? I'm so sorry, Sal. I couldn't help myself. I got carried away, and it became addictive. Connie, just so you know, I've talked to Terry and Phil. They filled me in on the details. I know what happened and with whom. What I don't know is why. I can't answer that. He was new and exciting. I guess I fell for his lies. But you had been with him, not just once or twice, but repeatedly for weeks. I felt my anger rising again and took a drink, trying to calm myself. She looked down at her feet. I know I can't excuse what I did, Sal. I was wrong. Is there any way we can get past this? I avoided the question. What about Tony? What happened to him? Where is he? Connie fidgeted and finally looked up at me, her eyes boring into mine, defiant somehow as she tried to gauge what to say. That night we were caught at the hotel. There were men there. 5 or 6, I think, but Tony was just taken. 1 minute he was there, then he was gone. Did you arrange that, Sal? I stared back at her. I sipped my drink again as I looked at her, ignoring her question, although I did wonder if she had somehow not realized it was me in her face that night before she passed out. It was terrifying. They took him and he was gone. Then I was tied up and a man held a gun to my head. I know he pulled the trigger, but that's when I passed out. I was terrified I was going to die. When I came around, I was alone. She saw the smile on my face briefly as I savored her discomfort. I watched as a shiver went through her. My eyes were locked with hers. So, jerk, what happened to your friend? Sal, don't call him that. He isn't my friend. Yes, I know I spent time with him, but I don't have any feelings for him. I care about you and you only. You care about me so much that you have been spending time with that jerk for weeks. She shrank back in the sofa at my sudden outburst. So, okay, jerk, tell me why I should give you any more of my time. You have already been proven to be a liar and a cheat. How do I know that anything you say is the truth? How the heck do you expect me to believe one word that comes out of your face? Tell me. The tears were flowing now down her cheeks as she started to see and feel for the first time the depth of the anger I held for her. So, have you been in contact with your friend? I asked again, deliberately choosing the word friend, knowing I was getting to her. I wanted to make her uncomfortable, make her lose it, make her suffer as I had been suffering. She looked at me through her tears. I haven't heard from him at all. All I know is he is in the hospital somewhere. That's all Phil said. I don't want to hear from him. He has ruined my life. I wish he was gone. Well, I can't disagree with that. I smirked. I sat back watching her face. There was little doubt that she was angry now at finding herself caught and hung out to dry and out on her own too. She had messed up and now she was getting the picture. We sat in silence for a few minutes, each watching the other, waiting for an opening. I bided my time. I had so much pent-up rage I was wary of letting it loose. I wanted to slap her, beat her, confront her, use her. I had to maintain control. She looked around the lounge again, looking for something to change the tack of this conversation. She gasped as she realized our wedding photo was missing from the mantel. As she looked at the empty space, I met her eyes and looked at the dent in the wall too. Answer her question. Her hand went to her mouth. She stood and moved around the room to each empty space. I sat and watched as she took in the missing memories. It was as if all trace of her had been removed from the ground floor. She slumped back down on the sofa. Sal, everything is gone. Is there no chance? She looked at me, defeat shone in her eyes. I took a deep breath. Connie, gay, I loved you like nothing else. What you did was hurtful and showed a complete disregard for my feelings and that of our friends. You were seen openly hanging out with him. In public, for goodness sake. Don't give me that it was only time spent or I didn't want to hurt you excuse. You did this and now you will face the consequences. Your friend has already started paying for what he did. That's right, there will be more of the same. I will bring him to his knees, but slowly. I will also ruin you in the way that you ruined what we had. Connie, we are done, over. Now, if you will excuse me, I haven't heard anything from you that will cause me to change my mind. So if you would just sign the divorce papers, then we can both get on with our lives. I do not want to see or hear from you in any way again. I am done with you. Now get out of my house, you unfaithful jerk." She sat in complete shock as my words sank in. She had really messed things up, but now at this moment I was past caring about her. The anger would get me through. She gathered herself and stood to leave. I followed her to the door. As she opened the door to her car, she looked back at me and mouthed the word, "Sorry." I raised my hand, with 2 fingers pointing forward and my thumb cocked so that it resembled the shape of a gun, and watched her face as recognition struck. Click, she shrieked and almost crumbled as she scrambled into her car. I closed the door on her and my marriage.